Good evening, this is the Oscar expert here. It's time for a review of Shang-Chi and the Legend of Ten Rings. You probably know the plot, you can figure it out. Let's just get into the meat of it. This is a Marvel film. Is the action good? The bus scene, when they're in San Francisco and the bus loses brakes and there's people on the bus to fight and Awkwafina has to drive the bus while Sean is like fighting people in the back. Great. That's exactly what I want from an action movie or a Marvel movie. You know, I liked that fight scene feels contained. It feels very like, you know, we're just going to watch some actual combat. The visual effects don't detract from the scene. They're not distracting or overbearing. And it was really fun. I think that was one of the best action scenes I've seen in a Marvel movie in a while. And it even reminded me of some of the best action moments in Black Panther. And there were a couple other action scenes that I really enjoyed as well. One that took place on some scaffolding where he's fighting off a bunch of people and him and Awkwafina are like trying not to fall and die. I thought most of the action scenes in the first half were really working for me. And the fight choreography is pretty good. I do think though that the editing in these scenes was probably a little too quick at times. I'm not an expert on like martial arts films or anything, but a lot of what makes some of those scenes really cool is the willingness to like kind of just show something in a more unbroken take so we can really just watch the choreography. I was hoping to get a little more of that than I did. There were a couple moments where the camera work was a little bit more impressive, but I probably would have preferred like more actual style from it. And the other thing that I liked about these action scenes is that they did feel grounded with like the journey that the character was going on. And I really liked the ability for the movie to just cut to Awkwafina whenever they wanted for a good bit of like comic relief. She's also just like the grounded character who has no powers. So she's kind of like reacting to everything going on the way that a regular person would. So that's always fun to watch. I thought she was really well utilized. As far as the character of Sean goes, I think this character is still like kind of has a little bit of developing to do. I thought the personality of this character didn't shine as much as I wanted it to, which is not to say that the character is entirely stiff. There were definitely efforts made to make them feel like a grounded human being, which I appreciated, but it definitely didn't go like a step further in making us care about him on a deeper level. The movie is grounded in like the past with his family and all the different members of his family kind of having to deal with the moment that broke their family apart. So I did like that the movie seemed to be going for like a stronger sort of emotional core to it. And you also have like the quote unquote villain who is Tony Leung playing Sean's father. I thought this was an above average Marvel villain because they were, you know, someone who was human, someone who the protagonist actually sympathized with, and someone who's not just operating from like, oh, I'm evil, I do evil. But even though the family dynamic did feel strong at points in like the middle of the movie, I don't think you're gonna leave the movie like thinking about the dynamics of family or like overcoming the past or whatever. Ultimately, the way that the movie settles like those issues feels like kind of generic or like default. But I do think as far as like the action scenes go, you know, I was pretty on board. If you asked me to rank the action scenes, unfortunately, it would look like the order of the movie in terms of like the best being the bus scene and then the worst being the final battle, which is not great. And I do think it's a symptom of Marvel just thinking that they need to like go bigger and bigger and bigger. But the bus scene itself is like a really good example of how doing something like kind of contained or a little bit more inventive is good enough in itself. And unfortunately, the movie thinks that it needs screeching fucking CGI demon portal spawn monsters. And I heard that the end of this movie was a little bit of a CGI fuck. And I did think I reached the end of it. I was like, oh, that wasn't that bad. Like, yeah, there were like a couple like little bat demon fucks who were like coming out like and they had to like kill those things. But I was like, that's fine. You do a little bit of it, you're done. But then we got into like the biggest demon fucks. The boss battle at the end of this movie was off the fucking rails. I was like, where the hell are the characters? Like, where are we within the story? What is happening anymore? It had like the biggest, ugliest fucking reptilian dino bird dragon like come out and just be like, and it was like fighting with another dragon thing and like trying to like suck the soul. And it was just funny. It was funny. I laughed. It was so absurd to have this like in the movie that the seemed kind of interested in like actually having characters doing stuff in these battles. And then you're just watching like two dragons fuck. And I gotta say the screeching gets me every fucking time. Like it's just funny. And all the while during this scene, they're like in the water and the water is just like everywhere. It's like splashing in front of the VFX. Are you trying to obscure the frame here, it's literally just clouded up with swirls of water. Like, I have no idea where the characters are. And the color palette of choice in this final scene is literally just gray. And yeah, like, a lot of the movie looks like a little bit gray, but it didn't really bother me. But then it was like, when you get to the finale, like, it actually got more gray, which is just weird. It's like, Marvel has so much at their disposal to produce like any kind of visual effect or cool looking shot. And a lot of times they just don't look that good. I am getting a little sick of how muted some of these movies are looking. And there were some scenes that were kind of colorful, which I liked. But the other thing that just kind of bothered me the more I thought about it was like, this was a sky portal. It's deceiving because it's some like rock door that has the monsters behind it. But make no mistake, like, that's a sky portal. It spawned things that flew out and then flew down to try to kill the people. It's the same exact thing, and it's like such a video game monster spawn point, just like to have things to fight. And they do this all the time, and it happened in Endgame. They really like are just not creative enough to think of a different way to have a final act. They don't know how to do it. They just have to throw like ugly, disgusting, easily like should be dead monsters at you. Easily that needs to die. Which is just not as interesting as the moments when, you know, he's battling with his father and there's like some emotional stakes there. I still liked that. They still offer some of that. I'm also not saying that the dragon couldn't have been a cool fight. I thought the Starro fight at the end of the Suicide Squad was a good boss fight. But the dragon just looked so like disgusting. Like, what if it looked like really cool and it was like, whoa, that's a cool looking dragon. It was the equivalent of like any space worm that you see in like the Avengers. The exposition and the backstory with his family and everything, it was important to know, but again, I said kind of before that the family dynamic stuff didn't pay off on like a deeper level. So it ultimately did feel like there was a lot of exposition for not that much payoff with it. But when the movie is focused on Sean and like the people around him, his dad, Awkwafina, his sister sometimes, that's when the movie's doing a good job. When the action scenes are more grounded, they're really good. I think some of the action scenes here are some of the best in a Marvel movie as far as I've seen. And there are some cool visual moments. Like I did like the trees thing, the forest part. And there was like a good little like creature animal that was cute, and you can't go wrong with that. Overall, I did like the movie. It lost me at the end, and it did succumb to a lot of the problems that a lot of MCU movies have. If you want something a little bit different in your Marvel movies, I think you are gonna get that. If you're generally just a fan of Marvel, like definitely go see it. If you're not that interested in Marvel, you might not need to go see it. I'm going with a 6 out of 10 on this one. Thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. Show me your best demon shriek in the comments.